Greetings, everyone. I am Steve Starcevich. I'm the leader of the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition's Transportation Action Team. Welcome to the first TAT Talk of 2024, Building a Safer and More Sustainable Transportation System with Oregon State University and the Oregon Department of Transportation. This talk is being recorded and will eventually be available on the coalition website. And this is really two talks in one, and I will introduce our speakers in a couple of minutes. First, I'd like to remind everyone that following the presentation, we will have a question and answer session with our speakers. If you have a question or comment for our speakers tonight, please click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen at any time during the talk. Type your question and comment, and then don't forget to press enter. Our Q&A moderator is Sarah Bronstein. She will be monitoring the questions and comments during the talks and then presenting them to our speakers during the Q&A session at the end. We've already been getting questions and some comments prior to this talk earlier today, and some of them have been directed to the city of Corvallis. And so I just want to remind everyone, this is questions and comments for OSU and ODOT, and please save your city questions for this upcoming talk. It's called Getting Around in Corvallis, Improvements to the City's Multimodal Transportation System. It's a Know Your City event sponsored by the League of Women Voters. The guest speaker is Rory Rowan. He's the Transportation Division Manager for the City of Corvallis. It's February 6th. It's going to be held in person and on Zoom. And for more information, go to the League of Women events page online. All right. So let's get started. So here at TAT, when we talk about sustainable transportation, we immediately think of the climate crisis. Carbon pollution from humans burning fossil fuels has led to dangerous climate warming. The transportation sector is a huge and ongoing producer of greenhouse gases. So the biggest goal of the TAT is to contribute to bending this carbon pollution curve to zero as fast as possible by promoting active transportation modes like walking, biking, rolling, and taking the bus. We're also excited to gain the immense local benefits that come with a shift to sustainable transportation. As the title of this talk says, if we actually do shift and build towards sustainable transportation, it will be safer for everyone, especially people walking, biking, and rolling. And if we do get this active transportation mode share shift, our community will be healthier. We'll have cleaner air and water. We'll be more resilient to climate warming and flooding. We'll have more space for housing, especially high density housing. It'll be more equitable for people who don't or can't drive. And then it will also be more prosperous for our business districts and downtown, and we'll have greater fiscal responsibility as well. Over the last 2 years, the TAT has been hosting public talks to raise awareness about the multimodal street and intersection design needed to shift to active transportation modes. We've hosted talks about protected bike lanes and complete streets, edge lane roads, protected intersections, road diets and roundabouts. And we've also hosted talks by OSU and ODOT. They shared details about recent improvement projects and upcoming projects on Southwest Washington Way on campus and on Tyler and Harrison near downtown. We were really impressed with their design standards. They used many of the elements in our multimodal street and intersection design talks. And it got us thinking, how do these projects fit into the larger goals and the overall strategy for shifting to sustainable transportation? And this brings us to our talk. We'll start with OSU. We are very happy and grateful to have OSU's Rebecca Houghtaling and Bob Richardson with us tonight. Rebecca is a senior planner with the University Land Use Planning Department. She is lead planner on the Corvallis Campus Vision, the OSU Transportation Plan, and the Washington Way Improvement Project. And Bob is OSU Land Use Planning Manager. And before coming to OSU, he was the planning manager for the city of Albany and a planner for city of Corvallis. Thank you both for being here and welcome.
Great, thanks, Steve. We're getting our computer on. And yeah, thank you. We're really happy to be here. Once again, my name is Bob Richardson. I'm here with Rebecca Houghtaling. And we really appreciate the opportunity to have a chance to speak with you and share the work that we're doing at OSU. And I think you'll see that the things that we're talking about are very much in alignment with the goals that you just laid out and some of the things that the benefits that you just mentioned regarding a movement towards more sustainable transportation patterns and modes. You can see here this photo on the left. This was taken on Campus Way on campus in 1963. And when Rebecca and I were looking at this, it struck us that how OSU is still dealing with many of the same transportation challenges today as we were back then. High volumes of pedestrian traffic, modal conflicts, access and delivery requirements, and parking challenges. The difference is today how we are approaching those challenges and the different values that we bring to addressing these particular issues. Over the past 6 years, OSU has completed 3 plans that provide guidance on transportation facility needs, design, and implementation priorities. These plans are the Corvallis Campus Vision, the OSU Transportation Plan, and the 2030 Sustainable Transportation Strategy. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about each of these plans before turning it over to Rebecca to get into a little bit more detail on some of the projects that we're working on. So beginning with the CCV, or the Corvallis Campus Vision, it provides overarching guidance on how the campus should evolve over the next 10 years or so. And it strives to ensure that the campus is a welcoming and inviting place for all people. That's students, staff, visitors, alumni, and community members alike. It identifies opportunity sites for development of new buildings and vital open spaces, as well as incorporating key components of the OSU Transportation Plan that identify transportation facilities that build or enhance the low-stress network. The next plan I wanted to highlight is the OSU Transportation Plan. And this plan has 4 primary goals. One is to provide access for all. That means providing a focus on inclusive design for all new projects and renovations of existing facilities. Second, we want to create a vibrant, walkable campus. That's one that is compact, efficient, easy to navigate now and into the future. We want to sustain the living campus, which means that whenever possible, we will reuse, maintain, and adapt existing infrastructure and support low-impact transportation options. And the 4th goal is to integrate with the community. And OSU is committed to working collaboratively with our city, county, and state partners. We're happy to be here this evening with those partners from ODOT. And that includes both planning efforts and project implementation. So the transportation plan, the OSU Transportation Plan, provides technical guidance, modal priorities, policy options, and it identifies 5 major projects that are in various stages of implementation. And we'll be talking about some of those in just a few minutes. The 3rd plan that I want to highlight is the Sustainable Transportation Strategy. The full name of this strategy is the OSU 2030 Sustainable Transportation Strategy, a transportation demand management plan for the Corvallis campus. And I know that's a mouthful. It's hard for me to get it out even. So for short, we call it the STS. But the full name is important because it tells us that the intention of this plan is to enhance sustainable modes of transportation to reduce the number of single occupancy vehicle trips to the Corvallis campus. More specifically, it aims to reduce the percentage of drive-alone trips to campus from 30% to 20% by 2030. Reducing drive-alone trips reduces demand to use land for parking, freeing up that land and financial resources to be used for other purposes that more directly support the university's mission. And of course, reducing trips also reduces transportation-related emissions and congestion on city streets. And Steve, I think that's very much what you just said in your opening remarks. And you can probably see the screen, but there were also the five values that we had. I think that some of those are important. If we just go back real quick. Right. We really want to be bold in addressing the climate crisis. We really want to be a good neighbor and help reduce traffic and parking impacts. We always want to keep our eye on issues related to equity and affordability. And we want to use our land and financial resources wisely. Thank you. The Sustainable Transportation Strategy has identified 15 key actions that we can take to move towards a more sustainable transportation system. And they're broken into these three categories of commuter programs, transit improvements, bicycle pedestrian improvements. And some of these really are dependent on our partnerships with the city and the state and the community to make happen. And so just in that sense of the importance of that collaboration, it's really vital for us to be able to make progress in some of these actions. One concept that spans all three plans is the idea of building on campus as a method in and of itself to promote sustainability and equity. At the forefront of our current priorities is the need for expanded on-campus housing. I think we can all recognize that there's a housing shortage in Corvallis, and this shortage contributes to increased commuting distances, congestion on city streets, and a rise in transportation-related emissions. Housing scarcity and affordability challenges disproportionately affect those with lower incomes and make a college education less accessible for those wanting to come to Corvallis to obtain that degree. With that in mind, we are beginning the process to amend the Corvallis Land Development Code. I think we had City Council on this evening, so recognize that. We've already been having conversations, good, positive conversations, but we're in the process of requesting to amend the Land Development Code to create opportunities to provide significant amounts of new on-campus housing so that more people can live close enough to where they work, learn, and play, that they do not need to rely on a private vehicle for most of the transportation needs. This type of compact mixed-use development makes sustainable transportation options more viable and fosters more sustainable and equitable communities within campus and the broader Corvallis community. So with that, I'd like to turn it to Rebecca, who will talk in a little bit more detail about some of the projects we're working on.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to share a few of our current and near-term projects that through which we are implementing the Corvallis campus vision, the OSU Transportation Plan, and the Sustainable Transportation Strategy. With all of our projects, the designs include ADA access improvements, focus on lighting, and meeting and exceeding the city's and OSU's design and construction standards. For those of you who were not with us last spring at our presentation, I am going to share one of the largest projects that we have ever engaged in, and that's the Washington Way Improvement Project. It is the top priority in the OSU Transportation Plan. Washington Way is a mile-long OSU owned and operated street that bisects campus from 15th to 35th Street. It's the only east-west street through campus that provides private vehicle access all the way through campus. And previously, the street did not meet the city's standards for a collector. And to make things more challenging, the eastbound lane was actually on Union Pacific Railroad property. The Washington Way Improvement Project is a nearly $30 million project. The road is currently under construction, and most of the work has occurred already between 17th and 26th Streets. It's completed. This picture, which on this bottom of the page, our slide, was taken a week after it opened, and it is representative of the improvements you will see throughout the corridor. When all 3 sections are finished, there will be wide continuous sidewalks and the first cycle track in the city of Corvallis. The roadway will be 10 feet further to the north, away from the railroad tracks, and there will be fencing between the railroad track and the multi-use path. There will also be new pedestrian scale lights on both sides of the street along the multi-use path and along the sidewalk, as well as at mid-block crossings and intersections. Accommodating or addressing a large infrastructure project like this and shifting a road 10 feet to the north in a built-up campus is not without a few challenges. However, the design was generally able to minimize impacts to most of our existing facilities, utilities, significant trees, as well as historic structures along the corridor. One of my personal favorite aspects of the design is this idea we came up with. On the west end of the street, the sidewalk is actually going to go through the small portion of the vet dairy barn that runs east and west. So this allowed us to keep the barn, the manure shed, and instead of having to demolish it, as well as achieve the goal of having a continuous sidewalk. The next project I'd like to share with you is the Benton Place 17th-16th Street corridor. This is another major project in the OSU Transportation Plan. The corridor serves as a key connection from on-campus housing to academic and student life facilities. 1/3 of our students living on campus navigate this dysfunctional corridor daily. Currently, the area is comprised of non-standard street and parking, no dedicated bike facilities, and disconnected substandard pedestrian facilities. The corridor is envisioned to have dedicated pedestrian and bike facilities, which will serve both a variety of users along the corridor, as well as the campus and community as a whole. The Corvallis campus vision identifies a portion of this corridor as a vital open space opportunity site. At OSU, vital open spaces contribute to the campus character and provide important green space for people to gather, relax, recreate, and even study. Examples include our MU Quad, the 30th Street Mall, and Lower Campus. When redeveloped, Benton Place will also include green space and plazas, providing a much needed open space for students living south of Washington Way, as well as an area to support athletic and student life events. South of Washington Way, this corridor goes on 17th and 16th Street, and the project will include a cycle track, a vehicle access lanes, a wide sidewalk on the west side of the street from 17th, on 17th from A to Washington Way. Construction of this corridor will occur in phases. The 17th and 16th Street portion is anticipated to start this coming summer, followed by Benton Place in 2027. When fully realized, the pedestrian and bike improvements will provide a low-stress option, which complements the city's transportation system plan, and it will be ultimately part of a route through campus from Western all the way up to Monroe Avenue. Next, I'd like to share with you the Jefferson Way and Monroe Avenue mobility hubs. These projects are identified in the Corvallis campus vision and the sustainable transportation strategy. Currently, regional transit stops are dispersed across the Corvallis campus, which is less than convenient for students and people trying to make connections between transit services. Outside of the transit center downtown, Monroe Avenue is the most active transit corridor in the city of Corvallis. However, you wouldn't know it given the current lack of amenities. The sustainable transportation strategy prioritizes the construction of a campus mobility hub to serve transit services and improve the attractiveness and viability of transit as a means of getting to and from OSU. The university, in collaboration with the Council of Governments, received a grant for the Intercity Mobility Hub on Jefferson. The renderings on the left-hand side of your slide. The mobility hub will include transit shelters on both sides of Jefferson Avenue, connected by a raised mid-block crossing. Large, frequent service buses will remain on Jefferson, while small regional connections, such as the Coast to Valley, Express will access the spaces within the mobility hub. The project is anticipated to be submitted for permits this coming month, and if all goes well, construction will start this summer. OSU is also in process of designing a mobility hub on Monroe Avenue, which will be located between the Black Cultural Center and Gilbert Hall, and it will primarily serve CTS routes. These are the images on the right-hand side of the slide. The goal of the project is to create a more prominent, pleasant arrival to campus. The design includes a floating transit island, shelters, site furnishings, as well as a plaza and quad. Construction of the Monroe Avenue Mobility Hub is scheduled for 2027, following the completion of the Wong Collaborative Innovation Complex and the demolition of Weniger Hall. The design of the Mobility Hub may evolve with the completion of the Monroe Avenue Corridor Study. And at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Bob to share that project with you.
Thanks, Rebecca. This is one of those projects that is an exciting partnership between OSU and the city. And I'm really pleased to be part of it. I think as most everybody on this webinar knows, Monroe Avenue is a very busy street. It's a unique place within the Corvallis community, especially between 14th and 26th Street, which is the focus of the study. In that area, there's a mixture of businesses and faith-based houses that share the street frontage with OSU. It is the city's busiest transit corridor, and when OSU is in regular session, it experiences a remarkable amount of pedestrian and bicycle activity. All those cafes, pubs, stores, restaurants activate the street with deliveries in the mornings, customers throughout the day and into the night, and the large exchange of students, and faculty, and staff from OSU and the surrounding area, surrounding neighborhoods to the campus every day adds to the vibrancy of that area. But it also creates those challenges of how to move the various modes of transportation, transit, bikes, pedestrians, up and down the street and across the street. So the city of Corvallis and OSU are partnering to develop a vision for how Monroe Avenue could better accommodate all travelers by all modes while enhancing opportunities for connections between the community and the university. The concept plan will serve as a guide for enhancing the street through a variety of treatments and improvements that can be accomplished incrementally as redevelopment occurs and/or as funding becomes available. Ultimately, the concept will be reviewed by the City Council and, if accepted, adopted into the city's transportation system plan. So just real quick on this, we've had some meetings with stakeholder groups, and we're working to create a couple of concepts that we would be able to share with the public. We're not quite at that point yet, but that's the next step, and so we're working diligently towards that. So to conclude our presentation this evening, OSU's efforts to build a safe and sustainable transportation system are guided by 3 plans: the Corvallis Campus Vision, the OSU Transportation Plan, and the OSU 2030 Sustainable Transportation Strategy. We are also pursuing amendments to the City Land Development Code to facilitate more on-campus housing, which, among other benefits, will place large numbers of residents within walking distance of their primary destinations, reducing reliance on private vehicles. With respect to transportation, the overarching goal of all 3 of these plans and projects is to create a safer, more inclusive, and more welcoming campus by enhancing sustainable transportation options on campus and supporting connections and services with our local partners and transit providers. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Steve.
All right. Thank you, Bob and Rebecca. That was an amazing overview. Let's bring on our next speaker. Please welcome Jenna Berman. We're so happy to have you. Jenna is the ODOT Active Transportation Liaison. And prior to coming to ODOT, she was bicycle education and advocacy and policy specialist for the state of Colorado. Take it away, Jenna.
Yeah, sure. Here we go. I want the initial thumbs up that you can see my screen, or High five. Great. Thank you. And you can hear me. Okay, good. All right. Well, thanks for having me, you guys. Full disclaimer, while Steve was doing his intro, I added a last second slide, so it may or may not work really well. Also, my presentation is up here, so I'm going to try to kind of look at you guys, even though I can't see you, to make eye contact. If you're anything like me, you've been zoomed out and PowerPointed out, and I actually thought about printing a copy of my presentation and holding it up and going old school and then like throwing it on the ground. But I thought maybe that would be too distracting itself. So anyway, if I start to lose you because there's words or pictures or you're just not into it, please just come back to my face so that hopefully I can help to keep you engaged. Today, as Steve was talking, like I said, he was like, went out with the like climate quickly. And I was like, oh no, I don't think I have a whole bunch of climate stuff in here. So I'll try and touch on it. But I was pretty excited to connect with you guys. I also creeped the list of folks that are on here. And I know a few of you, but I was impressed with how many people I didn't know. I live here in Corvallis, and so I have gotten to know people over the years. So what I was going to talk about today was context of kind of where Corvallis and this area fits in sort of ODOT landia, if you will. The active transportation tools in the toolbox that we employ are updated, pretty recently updated multimodal guidance, which is guiding a lot of the projects that you're going to start seeing in the next couple of years, and that I think is pretty exciting. Projects near you, challenges that we still have as an agency to implement all this stuff, and there's plenty. And I'm going to be pretty honest. So for my ODOT friends in the room, which there are a few of you I saw, hopefully I'm not too honest. And then some kind of advocacy takeaways, because I know we have a lot of advocates in the room. I used to do advocacy, and so I think it's fun to kind of to talk about that because it's a piece of the puzzle and it's a really challenging one. So here we go. So here's ODOT, the state of Oregon, of ODOT Landia, and Region 2 is this big light blue one in the upper left-hand corner. I cover the whole region. There's about 100 communities. There's a lot going on. So it kind of goes from communities like Corvallis and Eugene all the way to the Amities and the Sciotos and then half of the coast. So there's a lot in this area. I always start talking about this because I want to say that when I started doing this work 7.5 years ago, bike advocacy work, which sounded really, sexy at the time, I'll admit, working for Bicycle Colorado sounded pretty cool. When we started bike advocacy in the US, it was kind of this share the road concept. And I would ask you to raise your hands if I could see you, but some of you have probably you've seen the stickers, you've seen license plates, there's even some signs out there still that say share the road. But in the 40 or so past years, our whole bike advocacy approach, bicycle advocacy has become active transportation and pedestrian advocacy as well in a lot of ways. And we've shifted from the share the road concept to complete streets concept. And the big reason why, and some of you have seen this a million times, the big reason why is because we learned that share the road concept that we were talking about, which was just bike lanes and basic stripes and some of the things that you see around Kings Boulevard here in town, right, was really serving a relatively small percent of the cycling population. So it turns out that only maybe 8 or 9% of folks are comfortable being on their bikes with a stripe on the road between them and people driving. And about 60% of people would probably get out there if we were only building stuff that felt safer and more comfortable. So that's the 60%. You'll hear that term. Sometimes in my world of geekdom, you'll hear all ages and abilities, 8 to 80, all kinds of words now. And this is all relatively new to this whole kind of movement of active transportation advocacy. Now, this is the slide that I added totally last minute. So Steve, this is for you. I just wanted to say that active transportation has been going on. This work's been going on for a while just to be more inclusive about how we design for all of the modes of transportation. Now, the climate piece of that and intention behind it is significant. I wanted to say that ODOT has a climate office. This is simply a snapshot of their webpage last minute. And, but I wanted you to see that active transportation is a piece of the puzzle for ODOT to reach our climate goals and all of that as well. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on that we're working on, and adaptation and resilience. And so if you guys wanted someone to come from the climate office, that might be a really interesting presentation as well. So that's just kind of a plug, since I'm just talking about the sliver that is active transportation. So really quick, just to build terminology and understanding, the tools in the toolbox that we're working with when we're talking about making our streets complete, which means for all users, 8 to 80, all ages and abilities, are things like, this isn't everything, but things like rapid flashing beacons. You've seen those down on South Corvallis. You see them on Circle. There's a lot of things we can do with traffic signals, actually, also for people that are biking and walking. Things like leading pedestrian intervals where the pedestrians get to start walking sooner than the cars that get a green, so that they're less likely to turn over the path of those pedestrians or not see them. Sidewalk infill, that one's pretty, intuitive. Wayfinding, so that people are comfortable out there finding their way around, which makes them more willing to try maybe getting around a different way and to bike or walk instead of driving their car. Bulb outs, curb extensions. You've seen some of those in town, probably. Downtown, we have those. It shortens the crossing distance, makes it easier for pedestrians to be visible to people driving. Road diets, roadway reconfigurations, they're called different things. We try not to call it a diet because people don't like diets, but it's easier to say than reconfiguration. And lane diets is narrowing travel lanes. So those are kind of the pedestrian tools in the toolbox. Bicycle tools in the toolbox. Some overlap there, by the way. Buffered bike lanes, Circle Boulevard, separated bike lanes where you add something vertical in that separated space. Green pavement markings. This is actually a picture of Corvallis right here. So sorry, looking at the orientation of my pointing. So nice job, City of Corvallis. Roadway configurations again. This is what I'm most excited about right now. And some of you at the City of Corvallis are also excited about this. They're called neighborhood greenways. I think they were started by being called bicycle boulevards. And then we realized that it was kind of beneficial for all roadway users that are moving more slowly. And I will also say that, so this is when, sorry, let me back up. This is when you take a neighborhood street that's already lower stress or lower traffic volumes, it's already more comfortable, and you can do a lot of low cost treatments that just keep it really comfortable for people biking and walking and making it a little less inviting for people driving to take it, because it's not a quick cut through, right? It kind of slows them down. So I will say that in the 7.5, coming up on 8 years that I've been at ODOT, one of the things I've come to learn, and it's a little bit of a tough lesson to say, but I'm always honest. So here we are, is that it's going to take a lot of work for the state roads. So think South Corvallis, right? So for the state road to be comfortable for all of the things. And we just don't have enough funding to redo those roads, like some of those really cool projects at OSU where they're like moving the curbs and doing all that great stuff. We don't do that very often. So I've come to really believe, and this may change with time, but that my best bang for the buck from ODOT is to help communities like Corvallis work on their neighborhood greenway system to get a really good low stress system with those local roads, and to really focus on great crossings for the state roads or the busier roads. And so this is a picture of a neighborhood greenway crossing in the bottom right-hand corner, and it shows that there's protection in the middle. So this is the type of thing that I've been increasingly focusing on and feeling like I can have an impact with. Just for fun, because I also do art and love it, I wanted to show some of the creative things that I have seen, and the internet has showed me, in all honesty, of neighborhood greenways around the country. So art, this is an amazing opportunity for art. I love that. Corvallis has done that with some of the Open Streets events. I love it. The poppies, Sarah, yes, they were wonderful. Toppers on street signs. It can be as cheap as just signs going up for temporary installations and reminders to drivers. I've seen some of that in Portland lately down by Reed College. And this bottom left corner is actually a quick build project that is here in what was the town? This is in Mount Angel, and it's one of the first quick builds that we got out of the Safe Routes to School funding on the state system. So this is just kind of spur some thinking for folks. So let's get nerdy in a good way. And so this is where I'm going to talk about ODOT's new guidance. And I really think that one of the great things that ODOT done over the years is whether or not we're able to implement all of the amazing things that we have in our guiding documents like this one. We have had pretty progressive multimodal guidance that is available to local jurisdictions, so that's cities and counties. And I have presented to some counties like Lane County engineers. That was really fun. So because the guidance that we have is taken from best practices from around the country, and also Portland's really progressive around the country. And so this is our new guidance I'm excited to share with you, new as in the last couple of years. And the big differences are, I'm just going to go over what the big differences are and the big changes. So one of the biggest differences is that we decide the context first. So instead of saying one size fits all, 6-foot bike lane, 12-foot car lanes, in every context, we actually start by identifying the context first. Is it residential? Is it a traditional downtown? Is it a commercial corridor with like big box stores and big parking lots? And that guidance is what then kind of shifts who you're prioritizing through the rest of the design. So one of the other really important pieces of guidance that we have now is this design matrix around bicycle facility design. And if you look at this, kind of like I said, it would be a little nerdy, right? You look at this X and Y axis, you'll see that speeds are along the bottom, volumes are along the side. And so based on the speeds and volumes of our roadways, that bicycle facility design can go from being not protected at all, which are those shared lane, share rows markings that you see, to a basic bike lane like we have on Kings, 6-foot, to a buffered bike lane with a 2 to whatever foot buffer. There's a range here, to a separated bike facility, which means there's some vertical delineation. So this is what we are supposed to be implementing. Now there's a lot of challenges implementing this, and I'm going to talk about those too. So when we look at the roadways, again, I don't always go into all of this, but because Corvallis, I feel like, has a really sophisticated level of understanding more than some places, I wanted to quickly say, and sorry, the pictures are a little grainy, but here's what's up for grabs, I think, to try and get more space for people biking and walking. So we now have permission to look at narrower travel lanes for vehicles, right? So instead of always starting at 12 or 13 or 14, our guidance is telling us to start at 11 and work our way up. And if we go bigger and we go wider, we have to justify why. That's new. That's new for us. Okay. And so that's kind of what's fair game. So I know you can't see all the numbers on here, and I don't expect you to, but it's just a demonstration of like the fact that there's some wiggle room with lane widths that we didn't used to have. Another place to maybe get some space, that rhymes, that's fun, is the shy distance, which is the distance between the travel lanes for cars and a hard edge, sidewalk, a median, anything like that. So if you think about South Corvallis, you have some enhanced crossings on 99 through South Corvallis, right? And there's a pedestrian refuge island in the middle. And the way it used to be was we had to have 2 feet of space on either side of that. And now we have permission to maybe grab some space from there to reallocate into other realms. So the other thing that our new guidance has that I think really is pushing us in a wonderful direction is target crossing spacing. So also South Corvallis is a great example. Circle's a really good example. It's like, where are the houses? Where are the grocery stores? Where do people want to get across? And this recognition on this little chart that you'll see here, when it gets more dense, you know, when you go from that suburban fringe area or that commercial corridor area into a traditional downtown, there's going to be more crossing desire. There's going to be more destinations. There's more reason to spend time and money on crossings for people because, you know, whether or not you have those safe crossings there, we know people are kind of like water, right? They want to cross the street. High schools, anything around a high school, I'm like, we need safe routes to snacks because as soon as school is out, those kids are just like whoop, going all over the place across the street. So all of that said, that's like the really nerdy part. So if that was a bit much, come back to me. And now you're going to see some fun things that are happening in your area where we're working toward, to the best of our ability, with constraints that I'll talk about, implementing all that stuff. So South Corvallis, I've mentioned it several times. So recently we have this diagonal bike crossing down there. It's super exciting. That's the first one on the state system, actually, that we have a diagonal bike crossing. And this was all because of some of those changes that I was talking about. This recognition that we have a bunch of residents living higher equity, living on the southwest side of 99. We have a bike path on the northeast side. We have grocery stores. We have a skate park. We have downtown. No safe way for folks coming south to get back into their neighborhood, right? So that was the intent behind this. And we had a high rate of bike ped crashes right there because of all the bike commuters, Avery Park, all the stuff. Coming soon, paving project in Southtown. So we, a couple of us on this call even, are going to be looking at some of those trade-offs that I was just talking about. Can we narrow a travel lane here? Can we narrow up our shy distance a little bit here? Can we get to buffered bike lanes? Can we talk about separated bike lanes? So we're going to be talking about some of that as that project progresses. Philomath Couplet, you probably, if you've been through there recently, noticed there's a lot going on. There's some really big curb extensions on the corners that I'm really excited about. There's also going to be a 2-block, and you can't see a great picture of it because it's not built yet, but a 2-block cycle track. So here's the scenario. You want to ride from Corvallis to the Dizzy Hen for brunch. So good. Or dinner. They do dinner now too, and it's really good. And you want to take the path from Corvallis, right? So you're running parallel to the highway, you're on the path, separated facility, it's wonderful. You get onto Applegate Street, you get into Philomath, and then you just ran right into a very busy state road. And there was no way to comfortably, if you're really comfortable in traffic, you might have, you know, acted like a car and gotten into the travel lanes and with cars and then worked your way over and then got to the other side and came around. But anyway, this is great example of a low of an all ages and abilities design that I think 10 years ago we probably wouldn't have made happen. So I'm really excited about that. So please be patient as you go through Philomath and know that it's for a good cause. The Van Buren Bridge, this one I'm also really excited about. Bottom left corner, you can see the temporary bike ped path, I guess. And that's, I see a lot of people on it. So I feel like it's well connected and working well. You know, let me know if you disagree later. But what I'm really excited about is what's coming, because we got to that tier 1. If you remember that bike design matrix, that tier 1 was that separated bike facility. There was actually something vertical between people biking and people driving. And we got to it, and it's right here. And so we're going to have, thanks to the city of Corvallis being willing to trade off with a little bit of parking removal, protected bike facility on Van Buren, leading onto protected bike facility on the bridge. So lots of work went into that. Super excited. This is Harrison Boulevard. A few of you have gotten a presentation from one of my coworkers. This is not as far along, which is probably obvious by the graphics that I'm showing you, but this is also a tier 1 separated bike facility. Super exciting. So now we're going to have some separated facilities on both Van Buren and on Harrison, getting onto the bridge and getting off the bridge if you're up there, and not taking the path. And so you can kind of see here, but it's sort of a cycle track. There's a lot of different words these days. Don't worry about it. It's going to be separated from the roadway. That's the key. And then the pedestrians are also going to have a separated space. So we're also going to have protected corners. So the green, it's not going to be all green, just so you know, but the green shows the bike space. So when cyclists are riding along, they're going to sit at the corner waiting to cross 3rd, which was a big problem because there's a lot of right turning vehicles waiting to cross, and sitting there with protection between you and those turning vehicles. So that's a really big win, I think, for the community here. Okay, transition. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is really what the cities and the counties and those folks get to be the experts on. This doesn't fall on you. But there are a lot of funding programs at ODOT these days. It's still, some would say it's still a drop in the bucket compared to the money that goes into car infrastructure, and I get that. But I am excited, by this list. And so including the carbon reduction program, so kind of to get back to Steve's point, and the city of Corvallis excitingly got already in the first round of the carbon reduction program, got a electric bike sweeper, so bike lane sweeper. So I'm really excited about that. The ones in red are being shaped right now. So those are coming soon. So more on that. And that is my sister and my niece on the bike. So there you have it. I didn't actually put that picture in there. Someone else did. And then I was like, ooh, I'm going to use that one. Okay, so I'm going to end with a quick review of the big challenges, and then I'm going to positively talk about the kind of advocacy recommendations. But we do have some big challenges, for sure. We have competing policies. I mean, just plain and simple. So we have these active transportation goals. We have climate goals. And then we have a pavement preservation program that also has goals around how many miles of pavement need to stay in a certain level of condition. And those two goals, not intentionally, inadvertently, can work directly against each other. And DOTs around the country have for a very, very long time been very highway and car centric. We know this. And so those pavement goals are really high. They're really high on the list. There's a lot of pressure there around that. And so those are conflicting sometimes things. And so sometimes when they just want the pavement to be good, and I want to add a whole bunch of other things for people biking and walking, I don't always have that opportunity. None of us have that opportunity. Maintenance budget. Some of you have maybe been hearing that ODOT's been talking a lot about challenges with maintenance. This is very true. And this is one of my greatest challenges, I think, in terms of getting additional features onto a project that might help make it more comfortable for people of all ages and abilities. There's not a big enough pie. And so there's this question always of like, who maintains the thing, and can we even build the thing because we have to maintain it after we build it. And so this is really tricky. And a lot of times when I do an advocacy presentation with just advocates, which I've had the pleasure of doing a few times, I end with saying, I don't want you to be advocating for buffered bike lanes anymore. And I've got that. I'm in the system. We're here. I have engineers that are supportive. Like, I've got that. What I want you advocating to your legislators for is more maintenance funding, which doesn't sound sexy. So no one's advocating for maintenance. I feel like it just doesn't sound as cool as a buffered bike lane or a separated bike lane. But I do want to emphasize that. There's also some other things, we're constrained. We have to use our gas tax money within the roadway right of way, so we can't always build paths. We get a lot of earmarked projects through the legislature. The Van Buren Bridge was one of them. Great example. But we often don't get any discretionary funding to add to those projects. So, you know, there were some folks who really wanted, for example, on US 20, we got a legislative project. Some people wanted to look at doing a roundabout on US 20, but we didn't have the funding to add to that. So it was legislative. It was like, this is what we're doing. This is the project. So it's got to be that, right? This is also a little tangential, but I will say it's very important. Oregon doesn't love to fund law enforcement. And it turns out, and it's not a very popular opinion to say fund law enforcement fully. So I will own that. There's issues with that. But we can't engineer everyone to slow down. Like, we're trying and we're doing things like narrowing lanes, but the cheapest, fastest way that we could prevent crashes and save lives would be actually funding law enforcement more. Food for thought. We also have a really strong advocacy group here. I wouldn't even say advocacy. Let's see, a strong industry, that's the word, for trucking, the trucking industry. And a lot of our projects on certain freight routes have to go through a group that's very influential and has a lot of influence. And they also struggle with vertical elements and being squeezed with trucks and things like that. So that's one of our big uphill challenges. I just had to use a picture of him, but this is just about, I'm often presenting to advocates. So for those of you that are advocates in the room, this is my kind of rah-rah of like, stay the course, talk to each other, lean on each other, link arms. It is a piece of the puzzle to have advocacy. Though please know that there's a lot of us in the system these days. So hopefully, you know, your advocacy strategies have changed to like work with us rather than to be like, why aren't you guys thinking about this? Because we are. So that has changed too. But the rate of change and getting stuff on the ground is still slow. And so this takes time. So just stay the course. Wrong way. So I guess that's actually my last big slide is the takeaways for the advocates and also for those of us that are in the system working on this. But advice, you know, we've got to learn the existing processes before you try and change them. You know, there are ways to get complaints and things to ODOT, and there are people who care, and there are people who will go out and address them. And there's some channels where you might not hear a response, you know, for a while, that kind of thing. So figure out where to go. Know what you can ask for, hence the nerddom that I brought you today with the updated guidance. These are the types of things that we can be thinking about and asking for. Maintenance buckets. This is a really big one. So I hope you guys can all help us figure this one out. So just plugging that again. Get a first somewhere on the system, get a first. This has been huge. So in Salem, for example, they have a really great neighborhood greenway crossing. I showed that to the city of Corvallis and to our team, and we're designing something like that at Tyler. And first or second, anyway, someone in the room, James, knows. Just a reminder, advocates, that a groundswell of support can be 7 to 9 calls and or emails. I know this sounds silly, but at Bicycle Colorado, when I worked there, I'm going to only mention it once, but we had someone talk to us about state level advocacy, and he said, even at the state level, there were so few people that engaged that this could create a little echo chamber where a representative might be like, wow, I'm really hearing about this thing. Like, this thing really matters. Wow, we need more maintenance for active transportation. That kind of thing. Engage in the existing efforts, the planning work that the OSU friends were talking about, the transportation system plan that ODOT does, the refinement plan happening in South Corvallis right now, which is getting close to wrapping up. But when you engage in those planning efforts and they reflect your vision, that's then what gets funded and moves forward. Get the local jurisdiction on board, because really, while you are all of ODOT's constituents, because you're so many of you, it kind of funnels upwards. So the local jurisdictions, the cities and the counties are our like direct constituents, and then you are their constituents, right? So when the cities come to us asking for something, or the county comes to us asking for something, that's what helps to move the things forward. And then the other thing is just to keep at it, because it's taking a long time, but we are moving in the right direction. So that's me. That's my contact information. And hopefully we have some good questions. So thanks for the time.
Great job, Jenna. It's a
Thanks.
great slide to end on for a transportation action team. So thank you for that. lots of great questions and comments coming in. I do not envy the job of our moderator. I don't know how she does it every time so smoothly and so skillfully, but will you all please welcome our moderator, Sarah Bronstein. She's OSU's Sustainable Transportation Manager in the Transportation Services Department. She has moderated several other TAP Talks, and we appreciate her help very much. So keep your questions and comments rolling in, and I will pass it off to Sarah.
Thanks, Steve. And thanks, Jenna and Rebecca and Bob, for all of that great question fodder. You're not wrong that this is an educated group, and we've got questions, we've got like comments and information sharing happening in the Q&A box, and so I'm gonna try and start high level and ask some questions that are relevant to both of you. And then there were some questions that are sort of project specific because you both got into specific projects. And so I'll try to get to as many of those sort of nitty-gritty questions as I can. But I want to start with a question that's for both of you, and you can sort of take turns answering popcorn style how you will. And that's, you both mentioned collaborations, existing collaborations, and sort of the importance of entities collaborating with one another. And I'm wondering if you can tell me what good collaboration looks like and what are some projects that are happening right now that exemplify that.
OSU, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to. The first one that comes to my mind is the Monroe Avenue Corridor project, and that's something that that OSU and the city are working on. And we have an agreement, but essentially, as we're going to work sharing responsibilities and resources at a 50-50 level to just reimagine what Monroe can look like. And there's been really open, friendly conversation back and forth. We have slightly different interests occasionally, or slightly different pressures coming at us from the different things that we're trying to accomplish. But I think what's been really good about that collaboration is that we're simply able to say, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm hearing, talk about it, and just work to find something that seems reasonable to us that are leading that project. And then, of course, the other part of that is to hear from the community. And the city is taking lead on certain things, and OSU is taking the lead on other aspects in terms of gathering input from different constituents and partners in the community, and just bringing that all to the table. And I think just the idea that we're two separate organizations working together for a shared goal and having that really sort of friendly, collaborative, collegial conversation, ongoing and regular, has been really successful, and I'm really happy to be part of that.
Since you brought it up, Bob, I'll just insert one project-specific question about Monroe. We had someone ask if there's been any discussion as part of the Monroe project about removing private vehicle access between 14th and 26th Streets. Can you address that question?
Sure. I think there's been a small amount of conversation about that, but the idea is one that I don't think is really workable for Monroe. And that's because two things come to mind. One is that there are the businesses on Monroe, and they need to have delivery vehicles at different times of day. So we need to provide access for that sort of thing on Monroe. Also, it is a primary transit corridor. So we need to provide space for both the Corvallis Transit Service buses and the OSU buses to move up and down that corridor. And it's identified in the city's transportation system plan as a collector street. So the idea for that is that it will have some movement of vehicles. I think that especially because of the need to provide delivery services to those businesses, and the buses up and down the corridor are two big reasons why it's not a great location to have completely car-free. I can say that that a lot of the concepts that we've been working on would put private vehicles at the bottom of the priority list. And so it would be a car slow area, even if not a car free area. And it may turn out, I don't know yet. Like I said, the designs are still kind of being created and thought through. They're just very conceptual ideas at this point. But it could become very uncomfortable to drive a private vehicle down Monroe, that people might just choose to go someplace else, or it's be very strategic when they decide to go to Monroe and not use it as a primary pass-through point. We'll see how that all works out, but those are some things that could happen.
Thanks for going there with me. Any comments on the initial question, Rebecca and Jenna?
I was going to add, so I sit on the Campo Technical Advisory Committee, and a few years ago I was working with Lisa Scherf. She was the then city representative to Campo, and we had the opportunity to work together to get some funding for the Campus Way and 35th Street pedestrian crossing project, which is identified in the city's transportation system plan. And it's also been an area that OSU has wanted to see some improvements, because it's definitely a concern to both the city and the university. And to answer your question, what makes for good collaboration? It's a good partnership. It's someone who's willing to listen and work and see how we can all give a little to get something and really hear what's needed on the other side. And so kudos to both Campo and Corvallis for working with us on that. And hopefully that will be constructed this summer too.
All right, ODOT. What makes a good partnership?
Yeah, I'll be quick. We've had some great partnerships with the city of Corvallis, I feel like, with Josh Capps and Lisa Scherf, but a lot around communications, like that diagonal crossing in Southtown, lots of outreach that the city could do in addition to ODOT. So that was like just the communication piece. Also design review. We're bringing those designs, that Harrison project, to the city, and have gotten some really good feedback from active transportation folks at the city. One of the big challenges with Corvallis has been, and with other cities too that we work with, is that some of these more innovative multimodal designs are going to start to lead to increased congestion. And right now, a lot of cities, Corvallis included, at times don't want to take on more congestion, right? So if you add a bicycle phase for Avery and Crystal Lake at OR 99, there was definitely concerns that, there wouldn't be as much of the vehicles getting through, right? And that's really real for both of our agencies. And so the reality of congestion is going to become more and more obvious, which means that our entities are really going to have to figure out when we decide to take on congestion. So I think that's an example of where we've had a hard conversation, and I think that we're going to continue to have more of them. So
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's actually a question that came up in the Q&A. Someone was asking particularly how the new design guidelines sort of recognize and balance the priority for safety, for sustainable modes over clearing as many vehicles through an intersection during a signal as you can.
Yeah, and this is when my nerddom is somewhat limited, but we do have, acceptable ratings of traffic throughput or traffic getting through intersections, right? And that's still very fundamental to how we do a lot of our work. That said, we are starting to look at re-examining those numbers with this climate that we're coming into, and we know that we don't have enough funding to rebuild roads. We just don't, and we're not widening anymore. We're just not at a place right now where our agency is widening, not very much. There's some really old projects around that we're still trying to fund that I admit probably have some widening elements, but that's just not the norm. And so we are revisiting those, but that's still going to take time to sort of work through the policy, layers to be fully implemented. But I will say that, again, those trade-off talks, I'm trying to make a new acronym called TOTS, and I keep throwing it out and I haven't heard it come back to me yet. But the trade-off talks of the different contexts and at an intersection, okay, so these many cars need to get through, but we also know that we're getting people biking and walking right hooked. So maybe we need to not permit that right turn at this intersection. Those talks are being had now. And I just think 10 years ago they weren't. So.
Great, thank you. I want to hop back to OSU, and this is a question. Well, I have two questions really, and so you led with some really amazing images of Washington Way, what it was, what it is now, what it will be. And there was one follow-up question about that, particularly about what's the likelihood of Washington Way being continued through the agricultural lands towards 53rd Street and Reservoir Road. And so I'll let you answer that, but then I also want to sort of ask a higher level question about the same thing, but on a bigger picture. And that's that, what is OSU doing when you're thinking about prioritizing investments and where you make connections to the greater network, and what those connections look like? So I'll let you think about how you want to answer both of those.
Okay. We're just rock, paper, scissoring to see who's going to do what. So that's why we're sitting here.
So I think that the answer to the first question is, which was, will there be streets continuing west of 35th Street through OSU agricultural land? The city's transportation system plan shows collector streets moving from 35th Street west, as well as from Harrison Boulevard south through OSU property. Those streets would be developed should OSU develop their agricultural lands in a way that was intense enough to warrant construction of streets. Until that time, we shouldn't expect to see those streets constructed. And I'll turn it to maybe Rebecca can answer the second question.
Yeah, and I would just add one more thing. For those of you who want to get a geeky on land use planning and transportation planning, I'd encourage you to look at the overlays of the natural features and the area just west of 35th at Washington Way is riparian corridor. And it's an area where if we don't have to build a road, we shouldn't build a road because it's not good for the environment. So moving on, Sarah, you asked a question about how we prioritize or how we make our decisions on our investments in transportation. A couple different ways. Some are triggered by the city of Corvallis in their transportation system plan and development adjacent to that. Washington Way is a great example. It was triggered by the development of Student Legacy Park in 2011 or 2010. And designing a mile-long corridor and working with a railroad. If you haven't had the pleasure, I don't wish it on you. But so that's what's kind of taken the delay on Washington Way plus COVID. But we have the 5 major projects in the OSU transportation plan. So Washington Way, Benton Place and 17th, 16th, the pedestrian bike priority zone, Campus Way, and the parking garage access way. So those are all priorities, and we're looking at implementing those, especially with adjacent projects. The next big one is probably going to be Campus Way. In addition to that, we do improvements, and we really try to focus on ADA and pedestrian improvements just because we have 25,000 people on campus, and at some point in time, everybody is a pedestrian. So our priorities are starting with the modal priorities, and that's looking at pedestrians and then bicyclists and transit. So that's how we make our decisions.
Great. And I will ask you one little follow-up question.
Sure.
When I have an opportunity to plug in a project-specific question, I'll do it. And so you showed a beautiful rendering of this new greenway that we can expect to run up through the route where Benton Place is now. And we did have one question from someone about, I believe maybe there's some parking underneath that beautiful greenway that we're showing. And so is there going to be parking removal as part of that project?
Yes, there will be parking removal as part of that project. And so that is consistent with the pedestrian bike priority zone and the Corvallis campus vision. We're currently working on a project to do a surface lot to replace those spaces with the funding from that displacement. So it will be a no net loss for the total number of spaces there.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to ODOT. Since you were talking about design standards, I think it got people thinking as they were looking at your list of toolkits, and people were noticing some things that got left out of the toolkit and wondering if they're something that ODOT is willing to consider. And so a couple of the things that came up were rain gardens, also roundabouts. And there was a really good question I want to raise about maintenance. So when you're thinking about adding new, what looks like green spaces, whether it's in a median or a curb bulb or otherwise, like what does the maintenance look like for those new spaces? So that's a lot of questions all bundled into one.
Yeah, I got it. Well, first of all, I didn't show all the guidance. So yes, we have a lot of guidance around roundabouts now. And so that's really exciting. And the one out on 53rd, I use quite a bit to show how a path on one side, you know, people on that path can safely get across one leg of a roundabout. So thank you to the county for that one. I don't think they're on the call, but I'll do it anyway. So we do have a lot more guidance, just so you know, and anyone who wants to really dig in can always contact me about that. Rain gardens, we also have guidance around that. I don't know as much about this because there is someone who does just that at our agency, right? Of course. I don't know a lot about it. What I can say, I guess, is that whenever there's landscaping involved at this point in time, so that's plants in a pedestrian island that's like, you know, that you guys know well from Corvallis, or down in a rain garden, which is sometimes like lower. We are looking to the local agencies to do the maintenance for those. So that's just the funding reality that we're at right now. So that's just really tricky because it'll be an ODOT right of way and we'll say, hey, we want to build rain gardens in a bulb out maybe, you know, to slow down traffic and shorten crossing distances for pedestrians and add all this great safety stuff. But hey, city, if you want these, will you maintain them? And then the city might say, it's your right of way. I'm really confused why you're asking us to maintain them. And that is that's the maintenance issue right now. So that is that big tension point that I keep referring to. So that's what maintenance looks like for those, is that we're doing this right now. So
the individual that asked has taken on some responsibility for maintenance in a median, and so I think that their question comes from wondering because they've been doing some yeoman's work. So
yes, and again, I hope that, you know, this maintenance budget shortfall gets fixed, and that then we can a little bit more enthusiastically talk about some of these things. You'll notice maybe in town, I've seen some places where the city has bricked over or put a hardscape over what was a soft landscape with plants and things, because I think they're dealing with the same thing we are. So, yeah, so not the most fun answer, sorry.
It's all good. Sometimes these things aren't so fun. I'm sorry, I was laughing because I just read a question from someone who asked if the OSU staff are in a jail cell.
I saw that one.
Yes, we are.
In fact, we don't let them out. The planners stay in their little hidey hole. Yeah, we have some windowless buildings in the Western complex. I work over there too when I'm in office, so it's fun times. Okay, here's another really good question, and it's a little bit big. I think it's mostly for you, Jenna. And I just want to ask it because it's important. And it's about Corvallis is not the only community that's like this by a long shot, but towns that have a ODOT Main Street where there's a highway that bifurcates your commercial downtown district.
Yeah.
What are the challenges to multimodal transportation in that kind of environment, and what are some of the tools that you use to try and improve safety and sustainability?
I think I need a drink for that one. No, after. Well, I think that all of that new guidance that we're talking about is leading us in that direction. So it's all about trade-offs. A highway runs through it. ODOT had a book written published in 1999 that's called A Highway Runs Through It. Do you remember that one, Sarah? I see you kind of. Anyway, so a highway runs through it. And guess what? It was context-driven design. It's the same thing that I just presented to you guys. That's like the new, latest, and greatest. So this thing does go in cycles, but we do. So we're looking for that space. We're looking at what our wiggle room to reallocate the space. So I know that a Halsey, it's just kind of south of us, and that's a rural town where the highway runs through it. It's one of the 99s E, I think, and we got to buffered bike lanes. Because they definitely wanted to keep their parking because it's the downtown. A lot of times it comes down to bulb outs versus a bike facility. And I don't want to say versus, but you get the idea, versus parking. And for downtowns, the communities also often want to keep the parking. And so then it's like, okay, well, if we prioritize pedestrian movements with bulb outs, and then where do the people on bikes go? And then we start talking about parallel routes. And so that's the circle of like the trade-off talks that are happening in our meetings all the time. So I will tell you my big strategy, like personally, this is me, my big strategy right now, because we don't have a solution for that vertical delineation. It's a maintenance issue. Our folks can't maintain behind a vertical element for the bike facility. And it's a mobility freight industry issue. They don't also want them because they want that full space for big loads that come through. So in South Corvallis, I am going to be personally, and I know some folks in the room might not think it's good enough, but what I feel like I can get are buffered bike lanes. I'm trying to get the real estate now, which is a 2 to 3 foot buffer. And then my hope is that longer term, we get more maintenance buckets. Longer term, we get one of those dang delineator things that can withstand our traffic volumes and stay up. And then we add vertical elements back into that space that we've claimed for the buffer. So I'm thinking a lot about that in those downtown areas. And then I will say that when I have that question of bike facilities versus calming traffic and having those curb extensions on the corners and making crossings better, I will usually land on the pedestrian and calming traffic thing, and then see if there's another way to get the cyclists to the destinations. So that's kind of a glimpse. I hope that answers your question. I think that's kind of a glimpse into like the trade-offs that we're always grappling with.
Yeah, that's a great elevator pitch. I'll take it.
Okay.
And
like Matt just came in. He might have something else to offer. I'll let you know.
So kicking it back to OSU, we've had a couple of different questions, both before the talk and then during tonight, about the a project that's been identified in, gosh, so many plans, and in the OSU plans, it's been identified in at least one or two that I can think of, and that's the plan to extend the Circle Boulevard multi-use path from Harrison to Campus Way. I know that that's been a topic of discussion for many, many years, as long as I've been here, and far longer. And so OSU, if you can give folks on the call any updates that you have on the status of that project.
Sure, I can. That project is referred to as PB2 in the city's transportation system plan. And then I know that tells you that we've been talking about it, because I don't usually keep that sort of information in my brain for very long. But no, that is something that's identified in the Sustainable Transportation Strategy as one of those 15 key actions that that can be taken to reduce the drive alone trips to campus, because it would really connect those neighborhoods to the north of campus and provide a great way for people to get from those neighborhoods to the north to campus, and then beyond to downtown or wherever the bike path would take you from the area on 35th Campus Way. We've actively explored building that trail, the alignment for that trail with the city. That's like one of those partnerships that we kind of regularly in communication about. So I think both the city and OSU are interested in doing that. We've explored opportunities for it, but at the moment there's not funding available. I think when there is funding available through, say, another round of grants that kind of come through ODOT and other places, but I guess primarily ODOT is what we'd be looking at, then I'm sure we'll start to revisit that and see what we can do to realize that trail.
Okay, ODOT, you heard it. We're looking for the right funding source. So
got it.
Here's our opportunity.
Oregon Community Paths, let's do it.
That's the one. Yeah.
So I'm a couple of different folks asked questions about speed, and it's so important, and it's something that ODOT has a great deal to do with, but it's also something that OSU has wrestled with on our own streets and streets adjacent to campus. So maybe can each of you talk a little bit about efforts that have been made to slow streets, where there are challenges with that, what the opportunities are?
Yeah, Jenna, go first.
Yeah, I'll go quickly. But gosh, it's hard to summarize this one quickly, even though I just said that. The way that we have decided whether or not to lower speed limits, it has been reevaluated recently. So that's the good news. There's been a long-standing belief that like signs don't change behavior. So our traffic engineers don't want to just go out and change signs. Our community members, several people in the chat, which I appreciated, are like, can we just lower the posted speed limit? So the belief is, and I don't disagree with this belief, but is that the physical environment, the built environment needs to change to cue people to going more slowly, because not everybody will just follow rules, right? A sign. And so I think that is very true. But I will say that there is more flexibility than there used to be in terms of lowering posted speeds. And that's one of those things where when the cities and the counties and the local jurisdictions ask us kind of over and over again, it helps to get us to yes. So I'll leave it at that.
I can speak to a couple projects, Washington Way being one of them. It's actually funny, we opened the first section less than a month ago, and we're already getting calls going, did you guys build the road too like narrow? Like, because it's only 22 feet. And they're like, are you sure that's the right width? Like, did you do it right? And we're like, yes, like we moved the bike facilities to the cycle track. And we want to keep it narrow because people drive slower when it's narrow. And similar to like First Street downtown, where you have the raised intersections, the road will have raised intersections to both give pedestrians more visibility and crossing, but also to slow vehicles as they're moving through. We recently did a mid-block crossing at 15th Street, just by the new Prax, just south of Jefferson. And it's very gradual. If you haven't had the pleasure of riding the Beaver bus, I encourage you to take a tour of campus by riding the Beaver bus. And when you go over this crossing, it's just a nice little rise and down. It's like going to an amusement park, but it does slow traffic. And we do have, in all seriousness, some areas of campus where we're actually having to go back and retrofit. And there's all, back to Jenna's point about nerdy debates about like, is it a speed hump? Is it a speed bump? Like, are they too sharp? Are they, not sharp enough? But if you're familiar with campus in Jefferson between 30th and 35th, we've recently received requests from several stakeholders on campus to look at doing some traffic calming because it does have the 11-foot lanes and then the 6-foot bike lanes, which makes for a wide curb to curb width. And when it's a straight shot, people in a hurry drive faster than the posted speed. So.
Speeds are a big issue. I'm just going to throw that out there, like statewide, nationwide. It's a big trend. They are on an uptick right now, and I think that's why we're seeing a big part of why we're seeing more pedestrian fatalities. So traffic calming is a really important topic, and we all need to keep working at it.
Agreed.
There are so many questions still.
Yeah,
we're getting very close to the end of our time. And I really appreciate all of them. I will try to fit in one or two more, but I will also say that we were discussing beforehand how to handle the fact that there have been so many great questions, and we knew that we wouldn't get to them all. So if your question isn't answered tonight, I do want to share that we will be giving you the opportunity to send your questions directly to our lovely speakers, and they can answer them offline. But let's see if we can just get to one or two more. I want to ask kind of one more big picture question of all of you. What's something that your agency is doing right and something that you can do better?
Good question. It's a really good question. Okay, I'm going to jump in.
I can always trust Rebecca to jump right in.
Yeah. People might disagree, but we took the time to do planning. And I know people get weary of like developing plans, but one of the things that I've been at OSU for a little over 12 years, and we had some outdated plans when I got here, and we didn't have a cohesive direction. And one of the things that I think we took the time, and it just was kind of fortuitous, because when we were doing our transportation plan, the city was doing their transportation system plans. So they were kind of happening concurrently. And so we were able to work and make sure that the connections worked, and that we were being a little bit more holistic. And I think having a cohesive plan, having a direction, it doesn't mean you're going to get there 100% of the time, but at least you have an idea of where you're going, and that the puzzle pieces start to move you forward, and you start to see, oh, these connections make sense. It's like, oh, we're going to have a cycle track on Washington Way. We're going to connect from Western up to Washington Way. I mean, like the pieces start to fit together. And I think that's something that OSU, it took us a long time. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much work is going on all the time to move these things. And it's like only when you start to see, Knife River out there, breaking ground. For some of us, we've been working on it for 12 years. And for you, it was just, oh, surprise, they showed up that day, And so I think there's a disconnect there. And so maybe what we could do better is communicate earlier what's in the works, but it's also like trying to manage expectations, because it's like, there's a lot that is out of our control from a funding and partnerships and stuff like that. But having a plan is great, maybe a little bit more communication so people have an idea of what's coming, even if it is 5 years from now.
Well, I think you've taken a good stab at that tonight. We've gotten to see a little sneak preview of a lot of stuff that's coming down the pipe, and it's an exciting time to be working at OSU. There's a lot going on.
I'd agree with that for our agency too. I think the plans happen a really long time ago, and then sometimes we forget to do as much do the engagement. But I would add that one of the things that I think is I actually think that ODOT right now is doing a really good job with the policies and the guidance. We have some really sexy guiding documents that say a lot of the right things. And I think that what happens is you inevitably get pushed back from certain groups that aren't thinking about the climate stuff as much, or, maybe wanting that multimodal stuff as much. And so I think we really need strong leadership at the top to say this is the direction we're going to go, and we're doing this now. And I'm looking forward to getting some more of that, because the documents are in place, the guidance is there, like we know what we should be doing. So that's sometimes where the advocacy and the education, like we're doing right now, comes in, because then you all apply pressure to your representatives to stand up for the stuff. So kind of putting it back in your court a little bit.
Well, I see Steve coming online to give us the hook.
Yeah.
So I think we might be about to get cut off, as lovely as this conversation has been. But Steve, are we at time?
We are at time, and I never like to end these discussions. They're just so interesting and stimulating. But we can't ask for any more time from our speakers. I think they get some freedom soon. To the audience, like Sarah said, if one of your questions didn't get answered, our speakers are happy to get follow-up questions via email. So I've shared my screen. Their contact info is at the top. And then you can also find probably some of your answers in these documents. The links are attached, are listed here. And most of these documents were mentioned during the talk. So just a very special thanks to Rebecca, Bob, and Jenna for these amazing talks, fielding all these questions, all of your great work in our city. We really appreciate your expertise. So your talks and answers in the Q&A, that gives us a great overview, as well as a lot of details about our sustainable transportation future. And it's going to add a lot, so much to our community discussion. So thanks again. I'd also like to thank Sarah Bronstein for moderating, and Annette Mills and the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition for behind-the-scenes assistance and for promoting this talk. And finally, thank you to all you attendees and all your great questions and comments, and for your incredible interest in sustainable transportation. Very, very appreciated. If you would like to know more about the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition, please go to the coalition website, check out all the different action teams, and feel free to sign up for one of them and get involved. So thank you all for coming, and take care. Good night.
Thanks.